If you've sensed that something invisible has been building beneath the surface, do not dismiss that feeling, because tonight may become the turning point that finally explains everything you have been carrying. I'm not saying this to create fear or unnecessary drama. I am saying it because there are certain moments in astrology that seem to gather weeks of emotional pressure into a single instant. And tonight, Sunday, July 12th, is one of those moments. The Sun and Mercury come together in an exact conjunction at 20 degrees of Cancer, creating what ancient astrologers recognized as a Kazimi. The name comes from Arabic and is commonly understood as meaning within the heart of the sun. Once you understand the deeper significance of that image, not only from an astronomical perspective, but from an energetic and psychological one, the next 48 hours may begin to look completely different to you. This is not simply another checkpoint in Mercury retrograde. It is not another cycle of delayed messages, crossed wires, forgotten details, or emotional confusion. Instead, this is the rare point in the retrograde journey when Mercury is believed to stand inside the very heart of the Sun, receiving clarity instead of distortion. Imagine wandering through dense fog for what feels like forever, questioning every direction, doubting every instinct, replaying the same memories until you no longer know what is true. Then, without warning, the mist begins to disappear. The landscape does not change, but suddenly you can see it. That is the kind of shift this moment can represent. The emotional noise that has been echoing through your mind, the misunderstandings that have left you questioning yourself, and the uncertainty that has followed you through recent weeks can suddenly organize themselves into one unmistakable realization. There may be a truth you have been approaching from every possible angle without fully recognizing it. There may be an answer that has been patiently waiting beneath your own emotional resistance. For some people, that realization has been preparing itself for weeks. For others, it may have been quietly unfolding over the course of years. Yet tonight, the scattered pieces finally have the opportunity to lock together into a picture that feels undeniable. That is why I believe this alignment deserves your full attention. Even more striking is the possibility that 3 zodiac signs may experience this energetic breakthrough with exceptional intensity. For them, the message carried by this Kazimi could arrive with such unmistakable force that it becomes impossible to return to the perspective they held before today. Their circumstances may not transform overnight, but the way they understand themselves, their relationships, or their path forward could change permanently. Later we will explore exactly which signs those are and what this alignment may awaken within each of them. Before we reach that point, however, we need to understand why this past week has felt so emotionally demanding for so many people. Perhaps you have noticed your energy running lower than usual without any obvious explanation. Maybe memories you thought had been left behind have unexpectedly resurfaced, bringing emotions you believed were already resolved. Conversations with relatives or those closest to you may have carried unusual emotional weight, leaving you wondering why simple interactions suddenly felt so complicated. If any of this reflects your experience, stay with this journey because these experiences are not isolated events. They form part of a larger energetic sequence that has been unfolding step by step, leading directly toward what happens tonight. Everything you have been processing emotionally has been gathering momentum toward this exact point in time. This has not simply been another difficult week. From an energetic perspective, it may have been one of the most concentrated periods of the entire year, even though many people have struggled to understand why it has felt so unusually heavy. The sequence began on July 4th, when Mars reached an exact conjunction with Uranus in Gemini. Think back to that day for a moment. Did something unexpected interrupt your plans? Did an argument erupt without warning? Did you receive surprising news, experience an emotional shock, or watch something stable suddenly begin to shift beneath your feet? If so, those experiences reflected the symbolism of this powerful alignment. Mars brings action, urgency, and force, while Uranus introduces disruption, awakening, and sudden change. Together, they can resemble a bolt of lightning striking directly into your nervous system, breaking apart patterns that had appeared solid and exposing what had been concealed beneath the surface all along. Yet another layer makes this event even more significant. Both Mars and Uranus occupied Gemini, a sign ruled by Mercury. In symbolic terms, all of that volatile, fast-moving energy flowed directly toward Mercury itself. The challenge was that Mercury has been retrograde in Cancer, Instead of processing events through detached logic or straightforward analysis, the retrograde redirected everything inward, forcing the mind to experience those shocks through emotion, memory, family patterns, and deeply personal reflection. Rather than thinking your way through the disruption, you were asked to feel your way through it. That emotional processing may have seemed overwhelming at times, and if you found yourself unable to explain why your reactions felt so intense, you were far from alone. Many people have been moving through the same invisible current. Then July 6th introduced another demanding chapter as the Sun in Cancer formed a difficult square with Saturn in Aries. If that day felt unusually heavy, if responsibilities seemed to multiply, if emotional fatigue settled over you like a weight you could barely carry, the symbolism of that aspect offers an explanation. The nurturing instincts of Cancer were confronted by Saturn's uncompromising insistence on discipline, accountability, and reality. Emotionally, it can feel as though your desire for safety and comfort collides headfirst with life's unavoidable obligations. You may have questioned whether you had enough strength to continue carrying everything resting on your shoulders. That exhaustion was not accidental. It reflected the deeper lesson embedded within the transit, and yesterday brought another significant shift as Neptune stationed retrograde in Aries. Whatever certainty remained began to soften. The mental structures that had been giving you direction suddenly seemed less reliable. Boundaries that once felt clear became difficult to define. You may have noticed increased sensitivity, almost as though your emotional and intuitive awareness expanded beyond what felt manageable. It could have seemed as if every emotion in your environment was somehow finding its way into your own inner world. By the time we arrive at tonight, the emotional landscape has already been shaped by sudden disruption, relentless pressure, and dissolving certainty. Looking back across the week, these events no longer appear disconnected. They resemble a carefully unfolding sequence, each transit removing another layer of resistance until you reach a place where genuine truth can finally be received. Sometimes clarity cannot enter a mind that is still clinging to old certainty. Sometimes understanding only arrives after familiar structures have been shaken enough to create space for something deeper. That is why I believe the message carried through this Kazimi is not intended for those who are still determined to protect every illusion. It reaches the people who have been humbled by recent experiences, the people who have questioned themselves, released old assumptions, and become willing to hear something entirely new. Now that we understand the emotional path that has led us here, the next step is to explore what a Kazimi truly represents and why tonight's exact conjunction stands out as such an extraordinary and uncommon astrological event. Understanding the deeper mechanics behind this alignment reveals why its influence can feel so profound. There is one detail about Mercury retrograde that almost no one talks about, and once you understand it, the entire meaning of what happens tonight begins to change. Most people hear the words Mercury retrograde and immediately expect delays, misunderstandings, broken technology, emotional confusion, and conversations that seem impossible to untangle. There is a reason those experiences become so common. In traditional astrology, whenever Mercury moves too close to the Sun, it enters a condition known as combustion. Symbolically, the planet is overwhelmed by the overwhelming brilliance of the Sun, almost as though its own voice disappears beneath an impossible intensity. Instead of expressing itself with precision, Mercury struggles to function as it normally would. Communication becomes distorted, thoughts become tangled, and clarity seems just out of reach. It can feel as though your own mind is searching for a light switch in a room that refuses to brighten. Yet hidden inside this difficult cycle is an astonishing exception, a brief and remarkably rare turning point that changes everything. There comes a precise instant when Mercury reaches the exact same degree as the Sun, not almost there, not simply nearby, but mathematically united at the very same point in the sky. Ancient astrologers believed this was no longer a place of combustion. Instead, they described Mercury as entering the throne room of the Sun itself. Rather than being consumed by overwhelming light, Mercury is embraced by it. The symbolism completely reverses. What was weakened becomes strengthened. What was confused becomes illuminated. What was wandering without direction suddenly receives extraordinary focus. During this brief period, the same planet that appeared unable to communicate with confidence suddenly expresses itself with remarkable precision. The uncertainty that has dominated recent days begins to disappear. The emotional haze loses its grip. The scattered pieces of your inner world begin arranging themselves into something unmistakably clear. The transformation alone makes this moment exceptional, but tonight carries another layer of significance that deserves your attention. This particular Kazimi is an inferior conjunction, meaning Mercury is passing directly between the Earth and the Sun. Throughout Mercury's entire cycle, this is the closest the planet comes to our perspective here on Earth. Because of that proximity, the experience is rarely distant or theoretical. It reaches directly into your personal life. You do not simply observe this energy from afar. You feel it unfolding inside your own thoughts, your emotions, and your relationship with yourself. One way to understand it is by comparing it to the beginning of a new moon cycle, except instead of initiating a new emotional chapter, it marks the beginning of a completely new mental landscape. Ideas that have quietly limited you for years can suddenly lose their hold. Beliefs inherited from family, childhood, culture, or painful experience may no longer seem as permanent as they once did. The private stories you have repeated to yourself for so long that they started feeling like unquestionable truth may finally reach their ending. They are not gently adjusted. Symbolically, they are burned away so that an entirely different understanding can emerge from what remains. The timing of tonight only deepens the experience. At 7 o'clock this evening, the moon, which rules Cancer, returns to its own sign. Only a few hours afterward, at 9:30, the Sun and Mercury unite in their exact conjunction at 20 degrees of Cancer. Because the moon is present within the sign it naturally governs, the emotional dimension of this Kazimi becomes even more powerful than it would otherwise be. This is not simply an intellectual realization. It is the kind of recognition that moves through your body before your mind can explain it. It settles into your heart before logic finds the language to describe it. That is why the insight arriving through this alignment may surprise you. It may not appear through an unforgettable phone call, a dramatic message, or some spectacular external event, although circumstances like that remain possible. More often, it arrives with remarkable quietness. You may suddenly experience an unmistakable feeling that requires no explanation. A realization may rise from somewhere deep inside you, accompanied by the strange certainty that you have known this all along. The truth itself is not unfamiliar. What changes is your willingness to finally acknowledge it without resistance. Because this Kazimi unfolds in Cancer, the sign associated with memory, ancestry, emotional foundations, and the deepest layers of the inner self, the wisdom emerging now is unlikely to be brand new information. Instead, it resembles something patiently waiting beneath the surface for the right moment to reveal itself. Your conscious mind may have spent years explaining it away, building elaborate justifications, creating distractions, or constructing emotional walls that kept it hidden from full awareness. Tonight, those defenses do not necessarily collapse through conflict or crisis. They simply lose their purpose. They soften until they quietly disappear, leaving only a truth that feels impossible to deny. It reaches the center of your being with remarkable gentleness, yet carries a certainty powerful enough that your entire body recognizes it before your thoughts have fully caught up. For some people, that realization may arrive wrapped in unexpected sadness. Others may experience profound relief. Many will discover that both emotions appear together, impossible to separate. If tears surface without an obvious reason, if emotions suddenly overflow despite your best efforts to remain composed, allow yourself to experience them without resistance. There is a possibility that this emotional release is not evidence that something is wrong. It may simply be the natural expression of the Kazimi, fulfilling its symbolic purpose by allowing long-buried truth to move into conscious awareness. The ancient Sabian symbol connected with this exact position, the 21st degree of Cancer, presents the image of a prima donna singing before an audience, a performer whose authentic voice becomes so powerful that it captures the attention of everyone present. That image carries extraordinary meaning for tonight. It invites you to stop hiding behind carefully edited versions of yourself. It challenges you to stop filtering every feeling until nothing genuine remains. It encourages you to express what truly lives within you, instead of speaking only the words that seem safest or most acceptable. Authentic conviction does not require apology. Real truth does not shrink itself to make others comfortable, yet every symbol carries both light and shadow, and this one is no exception. The prima donna possesses another potential expression. She can become consumed by performance itself, exaggerating emotions simply to remain the center of attention. She can confuse dramatic display with genuine honesty. She can use emotional intensity as protection against authentic vulnerability. That is the deeper examination this Kazimi places before you. It asks whether your voice reflects your deepest truth or whether it has become overwhelmed by emotional performance. It asks whether your words arise from sincere self-knowledge or whether they simply repeat familiar pain because that pain feels safer than genuine openness. The distinction between those two possibilities becomes one of the most important lessons available tonight. For 3 zodiac signs, this question may arrive with extraordinary force, beginning with Cancer. If your sun, moon, or rising sign is Cancer, this alignment is not unfolding somewhere outside your experience. It is happening directly within your personal astrological landscape. You're not observing this chapter from a distance. You are standing at its very center, and because of that, the realization arriving through this Kazimi has the potential to reshape the relationship you have with yourself in ways that extend far beyond tonight. Looking back over the previous 2 weeks, a pattern begins to emerge. Ever since Mercury turned retrograde in your sign on June 29th, you may have felt as though life has been pulling you through an emotional review that refused to slow down. Feelings you believed had already been resolved unexpectedly returned. Memories that seemed finished found new ways to capture your attention. Individuals connected to your past may have reappeared in your daily life, or perhaps they returned only through memory, yet their presence felt just as real. Long-standing family situations that once appeared settled may have suddenly become emotionally complicated again. Beneath every conversation, every memory, and every unexpected emotional wave, another question has likely been following you with quiet persistence. One that has remained present even during moments of silence, asking for your attention again and again, preparing you for the realization that tonight is finally ready to reveal. A single question has probably been echoing beneath everything you have experienced lately, even if you have never spoken it aloud. What emotional weight have you been carrying that was never truly yours to begin with? For Cancer, that question is not a passing thought. It is the doorway that tonight's Kazimi is preparing to open. There is something deeply beautiful about Cancer energy, yet it often comes with a burden that becomes almost invisible because it has existed for so long. You naturally notice what other people are feeling before they even find the words to describe it. You instinctively protect those you love. You sense tension before anyone acknowledges it. You become the quiet keeper of family stories, inherited wounds, and emotions that no one else wants to hold. Over time, that gift can slowly transform into a habit of placing everyone else's emotional needs ahead of your own until you no longer recognize where their feelings end and yours begin. Tonight's exact Kazimi at 20 degrees of Cancer shines directly into that hidden space. Its purpose is not to criticize your compassion. Instead, it exposes every place where your generosity gradually became self-abandonment. The realization may arrive with startling force, almost like standing peacefully beside the ocean before an unexpected wave rises high enough to knock you off your feet. It may feel sudden, but it has been gathering beneath the surface for much longer than you realize. Even so, this wave is not arriving to pull you under. It is arriving to carry away something you were never meant to continue holding. The truth waiting for you is remarkably simple, yet it possesses the power to transform your entire relationship with yourself. You were never meant to absorb every emotional impact surrounding you. You were never assigned the responsibility of protecting everyone else from discomfort while quietly accepting your own. Sensitivity has never been your weakness. Your willingness to silence yourself has been the heavier burden. For so long you have become fluent in everyone else's emotional language that your own voice has almost disappeared beneath theirs. Tonight, that voice begins returning, not the cautious version that measures every sentence to avoid upsetting someone, not the carefully edited personality that softens every boundary before it is spoken. The Sabian image connected with this degree reminds us of the prima donna whose authentic voice fills an entire room. That symbolism now becomes deeply personal. You are being invited to speak from the center of your truth without apologizing for its existence. Healthy boundaries no longer require endless explanation. Honest emotions no longer need permission to exist. Words that arise from genuine self-respect carry their own authority. What makes this turning point even more meaningful is the timing that follows. Only 2 days later, on July 14th, the new moon arrives in your own sign. The understanding born through tonight's Kazimi immediately becomes the first seed planted into an entirely new personal cycle. Instead of beginning another chapter built upon inherited expectations, family obligations, or constant people-pleasing, you are offered the opportunity to create something rooted in your own emotional reality. If Cancer is your sun, moon, or rising sign, receive this moment with trust. Life is not turning against you. It is creating space for a version of yourself that has patiently waited beneath years of emotional responsibility. There is a strong possibility that this moment has been approaching far longer than you ever imagined, and tonight finally allows it to arrive. Aries, your experience carries a different lesson, but it is no less significant. If you have recently felt as though the ground beneath your life has become strangely unstable, trust that instinct because the foundation truly has been shifting. The exact Kazimi at 20 degrees of Cancer activates your fourth house, the area connected with home, family, ancestry, emotional security, and the deepest roots supporting everything else in your life. Cancer also forms a 90-degree square to your sign, creating an energy that does not gently whisper its message. Instead, it applies steady pressure until something hidden demands your attention. You are naturally wired for movement. When uncertainty appears, your first instinct is often to act, solve, confront, or overcome it through determination. Remaining still has rarely felt comfortable, yet recent transits have been steadily guiding you toward exactly that challenge. Only 2 days ago, Neptune stationed retrograde in your own sign, gradually dissolving the certainty that normally fuels your confidence. Earlier in the week, the Sun formed its difficult square with Saturn, increasing pressure surrounding your ambitions, responsibilities, and public direction. At the very same time, Mercury, retrograde, has quietly continued stirring emotional patterns within your home life that may have remained unresolved for years. Conversations left unfinished, family dynamics pushed aside, and emotional realities that everyone preferred not to examine have slowly been rising toward the surface. Every instinct inside you may want to push through these experiences using speed, decisiveness, and sheer determination. Yet Cancer energy asks for something entirely different. It responds not to force, but to emotional honesty. That may feel unfamiliar, perhaps even uncomfortable, but it also holds the breakthrough you have been seeking. The realization waiting for Aries is profound. You can construct an extraordinary career, pursue remarkable achievements, and build an impressive outward identity. Yet if the emotional ground supporting all of it remains fractured, eventually every accomplishment begins resting upon instability. Tonight's Kazimi does not expose those fractures to punish you. It reveals them so they can finally be strengthened. True courage is not always measured by forward momentum. Sometimes the greatest strength appears when you stop running long enough to admit what your heart has been trying to communicate all along. This alignment invites you to lead with emotional truth rather than personal pride. If you allow yourself to accept that invitation instead of resisting it, you may discover a level of inner resilience that external success alone could never provide. This process is not taking something valuable away from you. It is preparing something stronger to take its place. The only requirement is one that Aries rarely embraces without resistance: genuine surrender, not surrender through defeat, but surrender chosen with wisdom, intention, and remarkable courage. If you meet this moment with that openness, the emotional foundation you create from here has the potential to support everything you build in the future. Capricorn, your lesson may be the most confronting because tonight asks you to look directly into a mirror that reflects emotional truth with extraordinary precision. The Kazimi, at 20 degrees of Cancer, activates your seventh house, the domain governing committed relationships, marriage, business partnerships, contracts, and every significant one-on-one connection in your life. Since Cancer stands directly opposite your sign, today's energy naturally functions like a reflection. Mirrors reveal what already exists. They simply remove the distance that once made it easier to ignore. Throughout this month, your ruling planet, Saturn, has been retrograde in Aries, encouraging you to reconsider the balance between your personal responsibilities, your home life, and the demands of your ambitions. Meanwhile, Mercury retrograde moving through your partnership sector has steadily uncovered emotional conversations left unfinished, tensions left unspoken, and relationship patterns that discipline alone could no longer manage. You may have noticed increased emotional intensity within a current partnership. Someone from your past may have unexpectedly returned through conversation, memory, or dreams. Professional collaborations may have become unexpectedly strained, despite every logical effort to keep them stable. These experiences can feel especially frustrating because your natural approach relies upon planning, organization, structure, and practical solutions. Yet emotional intimacy rarely follows the same rules. Tonight's Kazimi gently but unmistakably reveals something that may be uncomfortable to acknowledge. Your dedication to order and self-control has sometimes protected you from experiencing the deeper vulnerability required for genuine closeness. That observation does not describe every moment of your life, but it may illuminate an important pattern that has quietly shaped many of your relationships. The message arriving now concerns the hidden architecture supporting your closest connections. The Kazimi illuminates where responsibility, emotional openness, vulnerability, and shared effort have gradually fallen out of balance. Perhaps you have carried nearly every burden yourself because accepting support felt too vulnerable. Perhaps you became so focused on preserving the external appearance of stability that the emotional reality underneath receives too little attention. Whatever form this pattern has taken, tonight removes the filters that once softened your perspective. Rationalizations lose their influence. Old narratives no longer provide protection. Projections begin to dissolve. You are offered the opportunity to see your relationships exactly as they exist, and at the same time to recognize with equal honesty the role you have been playing within them. That level of clarity may initially feel confronting, yet it is also the very insight capable of transforming everything that follows. One of the reasons I believe this Kazimi carries such extraordinary significance is because of the deeper symbolism woven into the relationship between Cancer and Capricorn. These two signs form one of astrology's most meaningful polarities. Cancer represents the instinct to nurture, protect, and create emotional security. Capricorn embodies responsibility, structure, discipline, and the drive to build something lasting. Together they describe the ongoing conversation between the heart and the framework that supports it, between compassion and accountability, between the need to feel safe and the desire to accomplish something meaningful. Today's Kazimi shines directly into the place where those two forces may have separated somewhere along your personal journey. It asks you to notice where emotional nourishment and practical achievement stopped working together and began pulling in opposite directions. Until that division is acknowledged and healed, creating the kind of partnership that truly reflects your highest potential becomes much more difficult. Healthy relationships require both emotional openness and dependable commitment. They flourish when vulnerability and responsibility stand beside one another instead of competing for control. That is the deeper invitation being offered now. I understand that kind of inner work is not simple. It asks for honesty, patience, and courage. Yet, if there is any sign naturally equipped to persevere through demanding work, it is Capricorn. The difference is that this challenge cannot be solved through productivity, strategy, or outward effort. The work unfolding today belongs entirely within your inner world. If you allow the Kazimi to reveal what has remained hidden, and if you resist the temptation to look away from what you discover, the clarity that follows has the potential to reshape the foundation of your most meaningful relationships for years to come. Now I want to widen the perspective because this moment extends far beyond any single zodiac sign. Regardless of where Cancer, Aries, or Capricorn appear in your birth chart, today's Kazimi represents a point of illumination. Illumination alone, however, is only the beginning. What truly transforms your life is the decision you make once that light reveals something you can no longer ignore. 2 days after the Kazimi, on July 14th, the new moon arrives at 21 degrees of Cancer. I do not believe the timing of these two events is accidental. Symbolically, they operate together as parts of the same process. First, the Kazimi uncovers truth. Then the new moon provides fertile ground where that truth can begin growing into something tangible. Without the clarity offered by the Kazimi, a new moon could easily become nothing more than another unconscious beginning, another attempt to start over while unknowingly repeating familiar emotional patterns. Instead, because today's alignment clears away confusion before the lunar cycle begins, the new moon offers the possibility of creating a genuinely conscious new chapter. That is why whatever realization arises today deserves your full attention. If an insight suddenly becomes unmistakable, do not simply admire it before returning to old habits. Give it form. Write it in a journal. Speak it aloud. Allow it to become the intention you consciously carry into Tuesday's new moon. That sequence feels deeply purposeful to me. First comes awareness, then comes creation. The Kazimi offers understanding. The new moon invites you to build a life that reflects what you now know. It is also important to remember that Mercury remains retrograde until July 23rd. The process does not conclude tonight. You are being given another 11 days to absorb what surfaces, to reflect on it, and to gradually integrate it into your daily life. I actually see that as part of the wisdom behind this cycle. The truths associated with this particular Kazimi reach into emotional memory, ancestral themes, and deeply rooted patterns that cannot always be understood in a single moment. Some realizations need space before their full meaning becomes visible. There is no reason to force that unfolding. Let each insight settle naturally. Trust that understanding will continue deepening as the retrograde progresses. Adding even more significance to this period, a supportive astrological pattern known as a cradle forms in the sky between Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, and Jupiter from July 15th through July 2000. To me, that suggests something profoundly encouraging. The universe is not simply revealing hidden truth and leaving you to manage the consequences alone. It is simultaneously providing an energetic framework that supports genuine transformation based upon what you discover. Opportunities to receive both revelation and structural support within the same sequence are relatively uncommon, which makes this stretch of time especially worthy of your awareness. Although Cancer, Aries, and Capricorn may experience today's Kazimi with particular intensity, its influence reaches far beyond those three signs. Mercury's retrogrades throughout 2026 all occur within water signs, Pisces earlier in the year, Cancer now, and Scorpio later in October. Seen together, these three retrogrades describe a much larger emotional journey unfolding across the entire year. Each one encourages deeper honesty, greater emotional maturity, and a more authentic relationship with your inner world. This July Kazimi stands at the emotional center of that broader process. It reaches further into family history, childhood conditioning, attachment patterns, inherited beliefs, and emotional habits than any of the surrounding transit. It gently asks every one of us to examine what we have continued carrying long after it stopped belonging to us. If this week has felt unusually intense, if forgotten wounds have resurfaced, if unexpected emotional compensations have appeared without warning, remember that none of those experiences exist in isolation. They have all been guiding you toward this moment of recognition. I do not believe the most important message of today will necessarily arrive from another person. It may not come through a notification, a dramatic announcement, or an unexpected conversation. The most meaningful revelation may emerge from somewhere much quieter. It may arise from within your own heart, your own body, your own deepest knowing. It may feel like a truth you have always sensed beneath the surface, but never fully trusted yourself to acknowledge. Tonight may simply be the first moment when that truth finally becomes impossible to deny. If you have stayed with me until this point, thank you for sharing this time and this journey. I truly appreciate your presence here. If this reflection connected with your experience and you would like to continue exploring astrology through this perspective, I would be grateful for your support by subscribing to the channel. I would also love to hear how this week has felt for you. Share your zodiac sign and your experience in the comments, because every story adds another layer to the larger picture we are all moving through together. Until next time, take good care of yourself. Honor whatever truth reveals itself tonight, and I look forward to seeing you again in the next video.